Hi, everyone. This is Carrie Lazat, and I'm broadcasting to many various platforms right now. And what I'm doing is actually, I am what is called, I saw the position recently listed as a Zoom DJ. So I'm going to step off and turn this conversation over to Dave and Rebeka, who are going to talk about the Voter Empowerment Project in API Vote Michigan and the great work that they're doing in order to get more people registered to vote. And I will let them take it away. So good luck, guys, and have fun. And if anyone has any questions, please ask them, and Dave and Rebeka can answer them live.
Great. Thank you, Carrie, so much. Excited to be on here today, in particular with the individual that I'm going to be talking to. As Carrie mentioned, my name is Dave Chandrasekaran. I am one of the founders of a small grassroots project called the Voter Empowerment Project. We are an all-volunteer run initiative that has reached out to volunteers from around the country to harness their great skills that they have from their careers, from their studies, to help support really small, high-impact voting rights organizations that are at the front lines of helping protect voting rights for communities of color, for young people, for new Americans, and for anyone else that's been historically disenfranchised in this country when it comes to voting. So today, I'm really excited to be talking to Rebeka Islam, who is the director of APIAVOTE-Michigan. In fact, they were our first partner for the Voter Empowerment Project. So they were the one we connected with over the winter and basically went to them and said, we have access to 100 nerds from around the country. What can we do to help you in your work since you are a small group that's reaching out and engaging such important communities in your area in Michigan? So I'm really excited to have Rebeka. Rebeka, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, David, and Carrie. Thank you. It's my pleasure to be here.
Great. So why don't you share with the audience, what is APIAVOTE-Michigan?
Sure, absolutely. So APIAVOTE-Michigan, APIAVOTE-Michigan stands for Asian Pacific Islander American Vote Michigan. And we are a nonprofit grassroots organization. And we are committed to justice and equity for the entire Asian American community. And we do that through grassroots mobilization. And at APIAVOTE-Michigan, we have a vision of justice and equity that gives people power through community connectedness as the framework for democracy. And our impact in the API community involves around increasing voter registration, advocating for public policy, and providing census education, especially this year, assisting folks with citizenship application, youth development, as you mentioned, and as well as coalition building. This year, we have been focusing on census as well as elections. And with COVID, we kind of just really shifted to digital organizing. And what motivates us every day to do what we do are the heartfelt stories from the API community members that reveal the challenges of realizing the American dream. We believe that it is our duty to keep fighting for their access to the American promise of equity and opportunity for all.
Great, thank you, Rebeka. How did you end up in the role that you are at APIAVOTE-Michigan?
Sure. So I. From age until age 6, I was one of the happiest child you can ever imagine, just running around, telling others what to do. I grew up in a small village in Bangladesh. However, by the end of my second year in school, we received the news that we would be moving to America. So my mom literally just packed everything, just luggages full of food and household goods that we would need to survive in America. And I was, more excited than ever that I would be going to America, which meant new school, making new friends, and speaking English. It was December, a very cold one, when my mom and my 3-year-old sister, we arrived at JFK Airport. And that was the first time I heard English being spoken. I didn't know what was being said by the immigration officers, but they sounded really cool. And I was excited more than ever that soon I would be speaking just like them. So after waiting one long year to finally get my paperwork to be enrolled in school, on my first day of school, my mom dressed me up, braided my hair. I was excited more than ever. The moment I arrived at school, I've noticed that all the other boys and girls at school looked different than me. And it immediately was like a cultural shock for me. So a few months into school, when the days got warmer, I was able to go out for recess. And when I was out in recess, swinging on the swing sets was my favorite thing to do, because that's something that I could do all by myself. And I didn't need any friends for it. And it's not that I couldn't make friends, I just didn't know how to make friends in English. And I remember an incident where I was out in the playground and one of my fellow classmates actually pushed me off the swing set, and I bruised a little on my knee, but wiped it off just like I've been doing for the past few weeks that I've been out in recess. However, this time it didn't end in the playground. The student actually went and told my second grade teacher that I had pushed her off the swing. So I watched my whole second grade class sit around as they discussed what happened in the playground. I didn't know what was being said, but I could tell that I was in trouble and my recess was going to be taken away. At that moment, I felt rage. I felt a little girl screaming in me. I felt like I just wanted to hide myself, just like hide myself in the bathrooms, just like I was hiding myself right before the teacher would call on me to read out loud in English. So I developed like severe anxiety at an early age. But later in the years, as I was learning to speak English and my accent started to fade away, I would constantly remember the first few years of my school experience in America and nod that I could understand what was being said. So in 2010, I needed to graduate from high school. I needed community service hours. So one of my mentors offered me to come and phone bank and talk to Asian American families during the 2010 census about their experience in America and encourage them to complete the 2010 census. At that minute, it didn't matter to me who I was going to talk to. I just needed some community service hours to graduate. As I was calling these Asian American families, one by one, they're picking up the phones and answering these questions. I started to hear my stories being told. I felt like, at that moment, I realized it wasn't my family that was only struggling in this new world, and I wasn't the only one getting bullied for the way I looked or for the accent that I had. I felt empowered. I felt like I found my voice, and that was my first day at API Vote-Michigan. And my journey still continues to empower youth, empower immigrants and people of color to have a voice. And the only way to have a voice in our democracy is through voting.
That's pretty amazing story. One we've certainly heard a lot from different folks who've emigrated to the country. Some of the things you mentioned actually reminds me of stories my parents have told. My father came here as a doctor to do his residency in the late 60s, early 70s, and then went back to, my parents are from India and Sri Lanka. My mom's from Sri Lanka, my dad's from South India. And so he went back after residency and got married to my mom and brought her back over. And I guess they came in December, January, just like you talked about. And she was wearing flip-flops. She was wearing chappals. And my dad had a friend who was this nurse that worked in the hospital who he befriended her and her husband. And so she came to the airport to help pick up my mom and remembered commenting. She tells this story to this day when I see them, saying, your mom was there in flip-flops in the middle of winter, and just like talking about the culture shock of, coming from a tropical climate to the U.S. And what that must have entailed. And I was very fortunate. My parents had a lot of privilege and certainly transferred that growing up, but there were circumstances where we had, issues around race. Obviously, I grew up in a pretty rural part of Western Pennsylvania and remember those stories, and similar to what you described in the playground. And I have mine from when I was 5 at some baseball camp and people saying the N-word to me and me not fully understanding why, since I didn't identify as African-American, but obviously that doesn't matter a lot to folks who are saying it. And I was lucky that through time, I was able to just befriend folks over the years that were accommodating, but I had the fortune of being born here, of speaking English without an accent, of, having privilege through education. And I recognize not everyone has that. And it wasn't until much later in life where I sort of embraced being a brown person and embraced my culture again after really being frustrated by it. But then I think all of this fear and discomfort around being not white has certainly come back over the past few years with the resurgence of white supremacy being very present, and not just in everyday life, but I know it is on disparity issues, on safety issues, on voting. So I'd love to hear a little more about what your organization is doing to address racial disparities among the community, particularly among Asian Pacific Islanders.
Sure. So for decades, the API community has always felt misrepresented and in some cases disfranchised when it comes to civic engagement. Since the 2016 election, we have increased voter registration by over 20,000 voters in the state of Michigan, with the focus in Southeast Michigan. And we have built a coalition of API organizations throughout the state of Michigan to teach people the importance of voting and why it's so important to vote and why it's so important to get civic, get involved in civic engagement. And, the API community is a bit split when it comes to voting and civic engagement. However, our organization has been working tirelessly to empower our community and why it's so important and why our voting matters. The API community itself, it represents a variety of cultures, religions, and which comes with its own set of challenges. So we have provided education on legislative policies that affect the API community and how the decisions are being made and how it impacts our community, both short-term and long-term. In the past few years, we have increased our Capitol Day participation with over 200 people who go to the Capitol to talk to their legislators about concerns and issues that affect the Asian American community, which includes racism, which includes housing, economic opportunities, and education. These are common problems in any community. However, in our community, there's an extra layer of challenges, especially when it comes to language barriers, and also because of the lack of knowledge, right? Now that we're in COVID and schools are deciding if they want to do remote or hybrid, it's already a challenge to navigate around that. But with our community, the extra layer of challenges, some of our members don't even have access to proper technology, or when when they do, it's usually in English, and it becomes hard for parents to navigate that for students. And which is something that is not necessarily on the minds of policymakers when making such decisions. And I believe now more than ever, the API community in 2020 is heavily involved and know that their voice matters because of the issues that are impacting the API community. And that might not have been the same 4 years ago or a few years ago. We don't tell anyone how to vote or who to vote for, but our community tends to vote not on candidates, but based on issues that are impacting families, right? Impacting us. So something as family-based immigration is something that's important to the API community, and that's something that we keep in mind when we go out to vote.
Well, you brought up 2020. You brought up this year. So unless you're someone who's been living on Mars without any radio contact with the rest of the world, I think folks know that this is a very unique year, a very strange year, but obviously a very important one. Because of the election, but also because of what the COVID pandemic has done, how it's devastating communities, both here in the US and abroad, especially for folks who are lower income, especially for communities of color, especially for immigrants. And the election presents one opportunity for people to weigh in on who they want to represent them to address the pandemic and everything else. But it's not just about the federal election, which is getting a ton of play, but all of the state races, the local races, city council races, mayor's races, who are going to make the decision about whether schools open or not and how they open, like you've mentioned. So would love to hear what API Vote Michigan's doing this year to engage the community at a time when it's probably, one of the most impactful moments when it comes to civic engagement certainly in my lifetime.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, if this is not if it's not the most important election, then what it is, right? And the API population in the state of Michigan is one of the most growing population, and we want to make sure that our community votes and they know that it matters. And no one should have to, especially in COVID, no one should have to choose between voting and having their voice being heard and compromise their health. For the primaries, we just had few weeks ago, we worked with Secretary of State's office to translate safe voting procedures for those who decide to go to the polls. We worked on translating voting materials on voting procedures. We've done absentee ballot chase through phone banking and texting to remind folks to safely complete their absentee ballots and return them. And we will continue to work and encourage the community to vote from home. And we will work as the liaison at the Secretary of State's office to offer those translations materials. We also have some virtual Know Your Rights workshops scheduled for those who decide to go vote in person, how to do it safely. And we're also working on creating digital content with your group, with VUP actually, to walk folks on how they can register to vote online, how they can do absentee ballot applications online, and how they can also vote online. We have short URL links that people can use to register to vote online. And right on our website, they can go and they have the ability to register people to vote, as well as update anything that needs to be updated, whether it's their address that might have changed since the last time they voted. Anyone can go on our website, www.apiavotemi.org, and register themselves and check their status. And we also have a list of candidates and their roles in government to help voters connect with legislators.
That's awesome. You guys are doing so much. You mentioned some of the stuff we're doing with you from the Voter Empowerment Project, and I want to talk about that in a second because I do want to reach out to folks to see how they can get involved with what we're doing. But first, I wanted to say, how can people, whether they're in Michigan or around the country, how can they get involved in what you all are doing, especially maybe if they are of Asian Pacific Islander backgrounds, if they care about that community, if they might speak different languages that can help your outreach in the community. I know in Michigan you have one of the largest Middle Eastern populations that are in the U.S. You have a huge diversity. I know I have friends and family from there that are South Asian. How can people help you do the amazing work you guys are doing?
Sure. API Vote Michigan has been truly fortunate to do the tremendous amount of work that we do with the supportive community. And I would say more than 50% of our work is done through efforts of volunteers. And we're always looking for people to get involved and help us with whether it's something as phone banking. And now that we're doing a lot of digital organizing, you can really support us from the comfort of your house, anywhere from wherever you are. And we can use support and outreach, texting, any skill sets that you may have. We can use it. And like Dave mentioned, I would definitely say get in touch with Dave as well. And he will he'll put you to work to support us. VEP has really just been helping us manage and taking care of like the back end of our work, maintaining our website, our newsletter, which has been making it really easy for us to focus on the ground and focus and serve the community. So if you want to get involved, please contact us. You can find us on our website, APIAVOTE-MI.org, or email us at contact@APIAVOTE-MI.org, or just get in touch with Dave, and he'll definitely put you to work.
Yeah, it's a great segue for me to put out my pitch for folks to get involved with the Voter Empowerment Project. As Rebeka mentioned, we're partnering in a different way than what's usually folks talk about when it comes to volunteering during elections. Often it's saying get involved specifically with door knocking, with phone banking, with text banking. Obviously, right now, door knocking seems like it's not something that's the safest. But we know that not everyone likes talking to strangers, that feels comfortable engaging in that capacity. Some folks don't always want to work on partisan efforts. They prefer to be more nonpartisan. And that's where we came in. What we launched last year in November was a project to tap into the volunteer interest from around the country and let people contribute in ways that are comfortable for them. And usually that's whatever skills they have. So as Rebeka mentioned, we've worked with them to help upgrade their website. We're doing stuff with writing content, both for the website, for newsletter. We help them integrate the amazing tools that were brought by Vote America, which is a nonprofit that helps integrate your website with ability to register voters online or request absentee ballots or find your polling place. We also are looking for volunteers who are great at social media, who can provide social media guidance. Graphic designers, folks who are good in data analysis, in research, in digital marketing. We are also doing an ambitious video project, like she mentioned, where we have video producers, professional video producers like Carrie and a few others who happen to have a little more time on their hands because as freelancers, we know that a lot of the creative arts has been slowing down under the pandemic. And we're creating, 15-second, high-impact, basically mini ads for groups like Rebeka's and others to put on their social media and even to do some paid advertising and maybe even some longer videos where, 3 to 5 minutes where it's going to have folks like Rebeka or others who look like the community they're trying to reach, talking to folks saying, here's your mail-in ballot. Here's how you fill it out because it can be tricky. Or here's how you request your mail-in ballot. Here's how you register to vote. Here's how you can confirm that your voter registration is active. Here's how you can get that ballot in safely when the time comes to send it in. And we're really excited to be doing that with your group and with other groups in the Latinx community in Colorado, in other Asian Pacific Islander communities in Arizona, in North Carolina, in African-American populations in Western Pennsylvania, where I'm from. So if you're interested, we'd love for you to check us out at our website, which is listed there, voterempowerment.org, sign up. And all of our volunteer work is done remotely from home. We were doing that long before it was cool, before the pandemic. But most importantly, it's helping groups like Rebeka's, which are unbelievable in doing frontline work, usually with 1 or 2 or 3 staff. Some of the partners we work with have no staff. They're all volunteer. And about half of our volunteers have said that they've never been involved in any kind of election-related volunteering. And so they felt like this was a way for them to get involved using their skills they already know, but also engaging in a way that, meant a lot for them. And at this time when the life just seems so overwhelming and really difficult and often downtrodden, a lot of them have reached out and said, hey, this was a great way for me to channel my anxiety to get involved. Rebeka, I just want to thank you so much for what you're doing in Michigan. And I know there's a lot of groups like yours that are working specifically in the Asian Pacific Islander community. About half of the groups that we're supporting happen to be from API communities. I don't know if you guys are more willing to respond to my emails because you saw my last name and so you recognize it. But as someone who is the child of immigrants from South Asia, from an Asian Pacific Islander community, who has a lot of friends and family from those communities, I just really appreciate engaging them because I know we are a small percentage of the U.S. population, but one that's often overlooked. and one that may not always participate civically. I do remember vividly, though, when you were talking about the folks you were reaching out to and the phone banking and how you started talking to people who looked like you and sounded like you. I remember how my parents did take things seriously after they naturalized and became citizens, and how they would vote. You know, my mom had that pocket constitution, and they would go vote. They would take us to the polling booths and vote. They would never let us in with them when they were inside the little thing. This was back in the day when you had to pull the lever. And they would never tell us who they voted for, because they had this strong pride, and like that's their anonymous vote they're allowed to make. So I still don't know who they voted for back in the 80s and 90s. But it was amazing to see them get more involved over the past 10 years or so, because I was involved a lot. And I think seeing them go and door knock for the first time and hearing about it back in 2012, 2016, hearing that they were donating money to candidates they cared about, they were talking to friends about voting. It was pretty exciting. And so I know that, what you guys are doing in Michigan is hopefully also engaging those communities to do more of that intergenerationally, from 18-year-olds to middle-aged folks to seniors who are retired. I'm really excited about our community coming out and vote, and just really thankful for all you're doing. I just want to see if you had any last thoughts or anything you wanted to share with the world out there.
Thank you, Dave. Really just for giving us that platform. And like I mentioned, we're able to do what we do because of support like volunteers and support like peer groups. Thank you. And I just really appreciate this platform, and just really encourage everyone, whether volunteering or just picking up the phone to call your neighbors, just do something. If this is not the year, then when else are we going to do it? Get involved. Thank you.
That is a great final point. If this isn't the year, when is it? And get involved in some way, whether that's donating, volunteering. You don't want to think back in the future about like, I could have contributed more to help more people vote, and why didn't I? And so I'm really excited about being able to talk to you, about working with you all. Very thankful to Carrie Lazat, One of Us Films, which is an amazing nonprofit group that she started to do video production with small nonprofits who are trying to get the word out, who generally don't have the funds and the in-house capacity to do this kind of stuff. So with that, I just wanted to thank everyone out there. I certainly am appreciative to you, Rebeka, and to APIAVOTE-Michigan, your board, and all the volunteers you do. And I'm just going to send one last plug to everyone. Please check them out. Get involved. Please check out voterimpowerment.org and get involved. And hope everyone stays safe and has a great week. Thanks so much.
Thank you.